There are a ton of tier 10 vehicles in World of Tanks, and of course you can see some of them on screen right here, but of course today's video is looking at the best tanks that I enjoy playing in World of Tanks, given that I have played something in the region of about 20 something thousand battles in the game. I think it's like 26,000 or somewhere in that region so far, and of course we'll be looking at the ones that I found the most enjoyable. So without further ado, let's kick it off with number one, which is the T110E5, and this is going to be a video both thinking about new player experience and tanks that are very good for people in general, and there are some niche case vehicles that are very good in certain situations, but we wanted to give a generic overview so you guys got an idea as to what tanks I think are some of the best, most fun, or just in general as an all-round nature very fun and good tanks to play. So first one is the T110E5. Now this is a tank that is an American tier 10 heavy tank, but as you can probably expect, given that it's quite small, it isn't necessarily the most well armored vehicle that's available on the game. It certainly is no mouse, but it does offer some reasonable armor on this vehicle, which allows you to at least use it to some degree to work quite well. And with the E5 being as good as it is, you can kind of expect that this tank is going to be a decent one because it has a wide variety of different things about it that are good. Now the first thing that it does have is the gun. This is the main reason why I love the T110E5, because as you can see, without a commander in it, we have 0.31 accuracy, making it very accurate as a general tank, meaning you can fire on the move, you can get shots off, and also using the really good gun depression of 8 degrees allows you to be quite flexible and use some ridge lines within the game. And when you combine that with reasonable turret armor, even though the cupola is a weak point, it's still pretty strong and can bounce a couple of rounds, maybe not off of super high penetration premium vehicles or premium rounds even, but it will be able to bounce quite a few if people don't know where to hit it, or maybe miss, or RNG doesn't go their way. They can bounce quite easily off the turret of this tank. And when you have the accuracy that you do, you don't tend to miss off of them, and especially when you're using some of the premium rounds, which happen to be the best kind of round, and they have a ridiculous penetration value of 340, so basically you don't bounce off of anyone when using those rounds. But you don't necessarily need them. 258 pen on the standard rounds of this thing is more than enough, and that is what I ran to be able to get 3 marks on this tank. Now, the way that we've set it up, we went with advanced powertrain or traction system, and then advanced powertrain, and then with improved ventilation. That's because we don't need the accuracy, and the damage per minute is not necessarily the limiting factor of this vehicle. It's often that you can't quite get there fast enough, which is why we wanted to be able to go 44 kilometers an hour in the E5. And although I am running fuel in this thing, I would highly recommend running a medkit so that you can be a little less kind of derpy in this tank, so you can go 42 kilometers an hour. And therefore it just gives it an all-round nature as the E5 likes, and that's kind of how I run it. You could potentially swap out, you know, the traction system for advanced loader if you really wanted to get a bit more DPM. You could even run advanced optics for increased view range, but for me personally, this worked really well. It allows you to get forward, be aggressive, and that's what the tank does really well, and why it works quite nicely. Of course, that's down to your own personal preference, but the E5 also has a brilliant tank line leading up to it, including the T32, the T29, the M6, the M103, all of which are amazing tanks to play. And so yeah, just another reason to actually grind your way through this tech tree, and it is a really good new player beginning tank line that gives you a brilliant tank at the end. Whether you're a new player or an experienced one, the E5 is very good. But moving on, we then have my favorite medium, or standard medium as I like to say, because there's another one coming up, and that is the FE4202. Now this tank is probably less so for the brand new players to World of Tanks, and that's because it has some nuanced ammunition. It, however, is very fun to use that ammunition, which is because it gets HESH rounds as its premium, which allows you to have 210mm of penetration but 480 alpha damage, and when you reload at the speed that this tank does, yeah, it's how do you say, pretty broken, because you're reloading in 7 seconds, and that's without a commander. So that comes down to about 6 seconds when you're using a commander. And so when you're dealing 480 damage quite readily, it is soon to rack up quite a lot of damage. And that makes this tank very fun to play, because you not only have the capability of just penning most things through the front with 268 pen, but also the ability to know when to switch ammunition to deal even more damage and ruin people's days, which is always fun. And with the FE4202 you also get a weird armor profile. You can see how well angled that frontal hull armor is that actually bounces a few rounds. Now it isn't the thickest of frontal armor, but it is very well angled, and people will bounce off you quite readily. It's a very low profile medium tank in terms of the size, which makes it even better. And for comparison, this is the side profile of the FE4202. This is the side profile of the E5. It's a lot taller. The FE4202 a lot smaller, thinner, and very well angled on in general. So really nice to actually have this tank in the game. And if you were to compare it to the Action X, it is a hell of a lot smaller than that vehicle. And it also has the same sort of turret armor as well. So you bounce off the turret of this thing quite easily. Now with super high penetration rounds, you'll go through the front of this thing. But remember that I'm talking about super high penetration rounds from things like Jaegeroos, 268 heat rounds, and of course all of the high alpha heat rounds that you see in the game. But that is basically the case for most tanks in the game, even including the IS-7 turret is capable of being penned by heat rounds from the top tier tank destroyers through the cheeks of the vehicle. So I don't think we're going to hold it against this medium tank for bouncing a few rounds. Now it does have the cupola which you can pen, but it's once again the holistic nature of this tank where it is just so flexible. It has the typical 10 degrees of gun depression that the British tanks have, has good DPM, good accuracy, good aim time, has yeah, just really nice view range as well, so you can spot for your team. And this is in fact my highest damage ever combined tank game that I've had in World of Tanks, managing to get 14,000 combined damage, basically getting 10,000 actual damage in that game as well. And I think I actually recorded a video of it, although it was quite early on, so you may have not seen it so far, but maybe I'll actually put it on the community tab for those of you wondering about this vehicle, and then you can go and have a look at that video if you're interested in seeing the results. But it was a crazy result for sure, and we picked up a crazy amount of damage. And yeah, this tank definitely needs a 3 market at some time when I got some actual time to play the game. And so yeah, rather than doing all of our reviews and stuff, and maybe it will be something we do on stream for you guys if you think that that's something you'd like to see. And of course, what my thought processes are when we're trying to 3 mark vehicles, especially at the higher tiers where it's a lot harder to mark tanks. So yeah, maybe that'll be an interesting kind of stream highlight that we can do, me actually just trying to 3 mark it for the entire stream. But anyway, moving on, we then have the Object 277. This is number 3, and this tank is a little bit of an underrated vehicle. This tank is very powerful when it's in the right hands, and it's because not only does it get the high alpha damage that you could typically expect from being a Soviet heavy tank, but it gets incredible mobility, 55 kilometers an hour. That is actually probably more effective than a lot of other tanks because the power to weight ratio is quite good, and it can maintain that speed quite well over various different terrain types. It's also got a bit of a troll armor. You can see it has like this boat shaped hull where it has a rounded frontal hull armor which can actually put people off quite easily, and so people will bounce off of this thing fairly regularly. Now any experienced player will know where to pen it, but that's the case for every single tank in the game, so once again we're not going to hold it against against it. It might not have the invulnerable armor from the front, but it certainly has very, very powerful one that I think most people can bounce off of, even if, you know, you're aiming at the weak point. Sometimes RNG doesn't go your way, and therefore you can bounce off of this thing, and that of course gives it the chance to plow one straight back into you. And with the accuracy for the 490 alpha being 0.36, that's without a commander once again, so it's going to come down even more. It will be even better. This tank also has decent view range when, of course, you've got a commander in it, as I said. But yeah, it is a very all-rounded heavy tank, and considering that it's a Soviet vehicle, it has 5.5 degrees of gun depression, which doesn't actually feel that limiting because it's quite low profile, and the turret's quite low profile, low to the ground, so you don't need the gun depression as much. But remember, because it does have the armor, you can get aggressive and you can deal a ton of damage really nicely with this tank as well. So yeah, once again, a very, very all-rounded tank that I think is very good for people to try out, and the tank line leading up to it is also pretty good as well, so that helps you in your grind towards it, because there's all you know, you don't want to get shafted by having to play constant bad tanks leading up to the only good tank in the tech tree line. So you have the T10, the IS-3, the KV-3, etc. as the previous tank leading up to it, so really nice one there. But moving on, we then have the actual heavy tank for the Soviet line, which is the IS-4. This is like the true heavy tank. The Object 277 plays more like a armored medium, or a heavium, or a medium heavy, whatever you want to call it. The IS-4, this is the true heavy of the Soviet line. And although many people will say, oh, the IS-7 is the best tank for new players to go for, in fact, I think that the IS-4 is genuinely the better of the two. And that is because the armor of the IS-4 works a hell of a lot easier. It's a lot easier for people to get a hold of. You bounce a lot more without really necessarily intending to with the IS-4. People don't seem to know how to pen it from the front, which is essentially the lower plate area, but not in the direct lower plate area. There's some bits that you have to be aware of, which is those kind of orange rectangular boxes, which are thicker armor. And then, of course, you can pen that frontal kind of weak point that is highlighted, like the outer poke to nose sort of area, whatever you want to call it, at the bottom, which you can see highlighted in red here. You can pen that if you've got high enough penetration, but it is slightly angled and is 240 millimeters thick, so it's quite difficult to pen that. The only other area that is a little bit of a weak point from the front is really that top of the turret, where the blue is on the top. This is a pennable area, but you need really high alpha damage guns to be, or high penetration, and of course high caliber guns to be able to pen that, as you'll need to basically be slightly able to hit it. But you know, when it's using its 6 degrees of gun depression, you can basically avoid people being able to hit that, and it's going to be a very slim shot, as with the cupolas, which are on the top of the tank as well, are basically impenetrable. Like if you're hitting an IS-4 cupola, honestly go and buy a lottery ticket, as it's not common for people to do it. And once again, the side armor of the IS-4 is absolutely cracked. It's got a ton of spaced armor and is very, very powerful indeed, and can bounce a ton of rounds, which is why the IS-4 is very new player friendly, because, you know, if you're getting hit in the side, maybe you didn't know a position, the IS-4 is a little bit forgiving. And although it can get penned occasionally, it doesn't generally get penned that easily. So yeah, I find this tank to be very, very good. It has a decent gun as well, with fairly okay accuracy considering it's a heavy. It has 440 alpha that actually reloads really quickly, which allows you to deal a lot of damage to opponents, but also get that accuracy to help you out if you you know, struggle with aiming, etc. And then we went with the advanced powertrain, so that or traction system even, to boost up the speed to a little bit higher, so that we could actually maintain speed and turn slightly quicker, which is what is going to help this tank out. And you can angle with this tank and over angle with it, which works quite well as well. So in general, tank is just perfect for, I think, new players. I think it is a very, very good one, and people don't tend to struggle when they actually get the IS-4. You know, you can have good games even if you are a brand new player. It's quite an easy one to adjust to. It doesn't take a lot of thought process when it comes to playing it. So I think it's a good one. It's a brilliant one. I find it fun to play, and yeah, you can have some crazy damage results in this thing. Then we move on to probably my favourite tank in the game, which is maybe a surprise to some of you, but it is the TVPT 5051. This is the Czechoslovakian medium tank with, of course, the fast autoloader, which can deal 4 shots of 320 damage per shell. Having a gun depression of 8 degrees, which is brilliant. 0.28 accuracy with the commander in it. You are very, very fast as well. 60 kilometers an hour. We're running it with a vertical stabilizer, so we want the best accuracy when you've got your autoloader, and you can't use advanced loader anyway. We're then running it with full camo, so we can spot for the team, as that was my kind of 3-mark build. It's the best way to kind of go from my point of view in terms of getting as much spotting damage, which is going to boost up your ability to get your actual 3 marks and 95 and 99%, 100% marks of excellence. And yeah, it was just a really, really good one for that. The standard rounds are perfect. Premium rounds, very good as well. You are just a walking, talking damage potential, which is what makes this thing very, very powerful. And you might think that because it's an autoloader, it gets terrible DPM, and that's just not the case. 3,000 with the bonuses that we've got, and we didn't use ventilation either. So yeah, to 3,000, very, very powerful. And with the 4-shot autoloader, you can track, retrack opponents, keep them locked in place for your teammates to hit them. This tank, just one of my favorites for sure, and hopefully you guys will get kind of a taste of this, as we'll do a video on each of these coming up relatively soon, so you get an in-depth look at them. And if you want to see those videos, make sure that you do subscribe and make sure you hit the bell notification, so at least you'll be notified when those videos go live. And of course, for those of you watching as of the release of this, we have the brand new free vehicles which will be coming out as part of the new season, which you can take a look at towards the end of this video as well. And if you want to see any more guides on some of the best tanks, the kind of usable tanks throughout the game, then I will leave my best tanks playlist, which covers loads of different tiers and stuff like that you can have a look at as well. And hopefully you enjoy those. Make sure to like the video if you did, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.